Namaste. Welcome, beautiful souls. Returning to my journey through the Tarot de Marseille. And today I'm going to share with you a bunch of justice cards. And this is, for me, this is not an easy card to discern. When it arises in a reading, I have a particular way that I like to go. But I think today I just want to take my time, look at the symbols in these cards, the variety of depictions of la justice, and just let this conversation roll however you wish to contribute. Namaste, Arya, welcome. And yeah, so there's a few guiding points that I think we can bring forward and discuss. So many, actually. This is such a bizarre card on many levels. So I think I'm surprised at, maybe I need to turn up my brightness. It could just be that. There we go. All right. Let's start with, I don't know where you want to start. Should we start with wings? Wings, no wings. So that's one thing, wings, no wings. Another is a crown, no crown. Which hand the sword is in. What is actually going on with the scales. And of course, what all these symbols represent. Sometimes we see bare breasts, bare feet. There's a lot. There's a lot to go on here. And I think maybe we should even begin with the number 8, talking about what that represents and how 8 is a depiction of 2 circles and coming full circle. Oh, and yes, also blindfolds. Okay, so do you know that of all of the decks that I have on the table today, the only one which I was going to show very last is the one I just threw on in the picture, is blindfolds. And I'm really surprised. And I pulled out most of my older decks. And so, yes, that is another discussion of blindfold and no blindfold. So, yeah. But anyway, let's go back to number 8. And 8 as these conjunction of 2 perfect circles that reflect each other. It appeals to me as worlds reflecting worlds, lifetimes reflecting lifetimes, events reflecting other events. And I know something similar can be said of a 1-1 reflection, but there is to this energy not only of the 2 circles representing the number 8, but then later on the energy of the lemniscate, that justice will, in that energy will always flow. This idea of change being part of nature feels really important to this card. And I do have the Crowley card on the table too. I want to talk about this shift in keyword as well. And I think some of the symbology on that card is really important. However, we aren't there yet. I was really intrigued with, so this is the, oh my goodness, I'm going to get all my names all mixed up. Tarocchi, Fine della Torre. This is a Bolognese deck. And the Minchiate, about 100 years later, the Minchiate, is one that has a lot of similarities to this particular deck. And in the Minchiate, the sword is in the left hand. as well as this one, which is Tarot of the Master. And in a way, I prefer the sword in the left hand. It feels more balanced, that this powerful tool, this powerful weapon, this powerful symbol is managed by the hand of reception. For the sword to be in the right hand, it's like a scythe. When a decision is made, it cuts briskly, and those words cannot be undone. And so it has a very, very different feeling. And I'm not sure that there is a card in all of the tarots that I have where the sword is in the left hand. I don't read with Tarot of the Master, nor have I learned to read with Minchiate. So I'm going to be looking for that, because I think it speaks more spiritually. It speaks a little deeper. Justice is such a big word. And of course, it was seen as a virtue. And we can look at that element as well, too. And we will when we talk about wings. So I really wanted to lead with that. And when I look at this deck, Tarot of the Master, and then some of the shifts in the newer decks, the scales are held free and clear of the body. And if you happen to have a Waite-Smith deck at hand, notice how ridiculously far out the scales are held from the body. And this reminds me of pendulum work and how important the way that the pendulum is held is to the nature of the work. And D, I haven't forgotten. It's on the list. Because if the arm is not anchored, if the arm is not strong, if you're not holding it with an exhale breath, other forces can move the scales. And of course, there is discussion of the manipulation of the scales with both the right knee and the left elbow, and we'll get to that as well too. D offers, Jodorowsky writes that justice, number 8, symbolizes perfection. Justice is a cardinal virtue, and it is of this world. Therefore, the sword is in the right hand. Does that say that the truth will prevail? The truth. And if you think of how justice has come to represent Libra and justness and law and order, I feel so ill-equipped to guide this discussion, because it is one of those discussions that so it becomes very challenging. It's very sensitive to look at Lady Justice as karmic balance. And for me, this card, through the years, through the tarot systems, I need to remind myself that we as humans never have the whole picture. And that the earth herself will restore and repair that nature will, that systems will, that the force of harmony, the force of balance is natural order. And it will find its way back to harmony. And so maybe when we see Lady Justice moving the scales with the right knee or the left elbow, it's kind of, a joke. And there is, in some of these, this is the Pierre Madenié, I don't know if you can see a hint of a smirk on the face of Justice. Perhaps in the Noblet tarot. That really we have little part in this. All right, so let's go back. Let's go back. So the sword is a symbol of truth. It's a symbol of power. And who holds the sword and how the sword is held also, I think, makes a difference. She is not interested in truth, but fairness, are just desserts, and to balance out the fair portion. So I think this is what I'm hinting at. And also I need to remember that truth is relative. It's like when we look at histories, we need to remember that it is the story through the vantage point of that country and that people or that person. And that if the same event is written about from a different perspective, the history is quite different. And I was so fortunate when I was in grade 12. I had a history teacher that introduced us to revisionist history. And we looked at the stories of many people through different lenses. And it was powerful as a young person to know that there may be different versions of stories. And so Lady Justice, La Justice, is can I use the word natural? It will find its way. And you can see that. I think the earth is our best example when it responds to disharmony and how it will reset itself. I'm very interested in this older deck that she neither has wings nor the back of a chair, nor a crown. And there appears to be an orb as well on top of the scales. Perhaps a symbol of power, a symbol of the wealthy. There's hints and discussions of royalty and hints of... Okay, what I want to mention here. Sorry, I'm kind of hopping all over the place. Jodorowsky, who you mentioned, mentions this little bit of purple that's hidden on the card here. And I don't know if we see that hint of change of color in other older decks as well. But I want to look for forces or symbols larger than us that are at play. And justice, I believe, can be a human. It need not be an angel. And how did the wings of the angel become the backs of a chair? Okay, let's go to Arya's comment. I've never understood justice as symbolizing perfection, as it's always literally a contest, a balance between discovery and assertion implemented by humans. And I think that is a common perspective of this card, and it has to do with the name of the card. And the way the card is drawn leads us to law and order and our human attempt to bring balance and order to this world. And so I think this also, it's way back when I was doing card comparisons, I did an episode on justice versus judgment. And I think these two cards really need some time to find their way into understanding of the tarot reader. And early on in the majors, this energy of justice, I believe, is one that says, if you step the wrong way or you choose a path that is not where you're supposed to be going, or if you don't express yourself in a way that supports who you are, something is going to happen to rectify that. If you don't do it faster than nature will, we'll call it nature. And so this idea of perfection is, it's a larger concept than legal justice and humans' attempt to bring order to the world. And it's very hard to look back through time and to, because what happened in the judicial system throughout history likely, big picture-wise, was not just. I mean, I don't even have to say likely. It was completely unjust. But in that moment, in that time, for those people in that situation, for the people who made the laws, and usually the upper class, it did bring balance and it did bring order. And it was about control. And so there is such a wide range of feelings and deep and emotional feelings about this card. Justice has the overview we can never know. She knows everything and will give the justice of God. Okay, so the big picture view. And in some cards, it appears that she is up quite a bit higher and that we're looking up to her. And then the backs of the chair take on this image of wings. And there is this godliness kind of energy about justice or the judge. And I think about how this spills over today to the judicial system and the reverence we have for judges and the way that they are honored and treated and elevated in our society. And yes, it is a huge undertaking educationally. It is a huge sacrifice to one's life to take on such a path. And deservedly, in many ways, they are owed due respect. But I think there's more to that elevation of the occupation, of the role, than we can see. And I wonder if we were able to have a vantage point of divine, through the divine, if we could see a really interesting karma playing out for the person who took on that role of judge. I imagine the chairbacks were designed to hint at the wings of the divine. Yeah. Perfection is not ours to achieve in this world. Justice is the balance of God. And I think that's why the key word adjustment really resonates well with me. And I tend to bring that word up regardless of the kind of deck that I'm working with when this card arises in a reading. And I'm looking at the cards on the left or the right, above, below, thinking, what kind of adjustment could this querent make so that they could move through this issue more easily? Because to me, this card says that justice will prevail and things are going to be balanced, whether you like it or not, whether you see it as justice or not. So what can you do to make that more, so that you can navigate that better? In many religions, the very act of trying to achieve perfection is impossible. Perfection is the pride before the fall. And I think that's also reflected in the overachievement, the striving in the material world as well too. And we see this with athletes and athletes who have a particular kind of trainer. I mean, we just watched the Olympics and all kinds of documentaries, historical documentaries of the tragedies of athletes, using that as one example. Justice is not the law. Men make laws to control the population. Justice beyond the laws of man. If the laws fail, justice will weigh everyone and decide what is just. And what happens in a courtroom, what happens in a appeal court, what happens when a good Samaritan lawyer comes back 20, 30, 40 years later and is able to prove innocence. These are great, great and difficult lessons for us to endure, especially if we are close to a situation. And, I think of stories that during COVID, there was just some horrible things that arose. There was a young boy in this neighborhood where I live, white boy, and it's a very familiar story. He was seen the wrong time, the wrong place, treated aggressively by the police, and was asphyxiated, was killed. And it took years and years and years, and there was a big campaign, justice for this boy. And when I hear this kind of story, and I'm taking a big swallow here because I think it's very difficult as a parent or somebody close to this person to even consider this. But what if this person's dharma was to make a difference in the justice system, to make a difference in the world, to do something about the I don't know, irrational amount of power that police and certain authorities have in our culture. When somebody dies like that, there has to be a bigger picture. There just has to. And I pray for those families, and I hold in my heart that karma will eventually turn. I don't know, Arya. Physics is a scientific principle, and there is a unseen force that I think science hasn't named, but occasionally recognizes. And I think man, we have free will. And I knew this discussion this day I was going to go off this way. I want to get back to the cards. I'm going to make, maybe we can carry this on, but it's an interesting dance between will, free will, and divine will. Okay. Another thing, and I need to do a deep dive into this deck, and that is the use of the suns and moons in the corner of the cards, and how they appear in some cards and not in others. I just find it very interesting. All right, so this is the Pierre Madenié deck, right? Okay. I believe Jodorowsky talks about this. This is the Dodal, the this version of the Dodal by Jean-Claude Flornoy. And justice has, if you look closely at the picture, there's lots of bits and pieces that aren't in balance. It shows imperfection. And I can't quite remember what he said about this. So for example, let's call this a necklace or a collar. It's up higher on one side. We don't see it completely. If you look at the garment, it's not balanced on one side. The shoulders are not the same. The wings are not the same. And so there's this juxtaposition between perfection and imperfection. And that we are imperfect beings in a perfect world. I think we can look to sacred geometry perhaps as well. And that definitely has a part in this discussion. And how there is a power, there is a force within the energy of sacred geometry that will maintain certain shapes and certain patterns that exist in our world as a force to help us achieve balance. And so this is the Jodorowsky card. Honestly, I don't know. I will always read the deck that I'm working with, and I will lean into the symbols that are showing. I will speak to the symbols that are coming forth off the card, and the symbols especially that move from card to card. Because I believe that if I'm going to take the Dodal off the shelf and read with this card, that I need to pay attention to the iconography as it appears in the reading. And yes, there is, in my mind and in my experience, plenty of other justice cards that come to mind. But I want to read with the one that is in front of me. And as I'm looking at all these cards on the computer screen here, you mentioned, Dee, about the way the justice is forward facing. And I'm looking at the abundance of fabric and the position of the knees and the strength that this figure commands. And I think there is a place here to expand into the tremendous fortitude that it takes to allow justice, to seek justice, to let justice. Okay, I want to go back to this. This doesn't hold true for Noblet. The Empress is looking at us in his deck. Okay. What does the facial expression say to you? I found it. This, by the way, is Gergali. I went through his Etsy shop. Bagaméri. This is Tarocchi 23. I found his artwork quite enchanting and purchased this deck. And I love the white space. And one of the things that he says about this deck is that he takes the features across decades, centuries of Tarot de Marseille and puts together the ones that speak to him. Blindfolded justice. I think that supports the idea of natural karmic laws. Justice doesn't need to see, because justice has a higher understanding. And I think of I think there's a close link between an oracle and this concept of justice. And I find it weird how this card is named Justice. And I think that's a historical, I think it has to do with language and the evolution of language and what that word meant centuries and centuries ago, perhaps had a slightly different nuance to the meaning of the word. Understanding is appreciated sometimes, but it's, let's go here. Understanding is appreciated sometimes, but it's definitely not required. No. She knows and doesn't fear the outcome because she has seen them all. Okay, so this is where I'm going, Dee. Do you know the movie The Matrix? The first one, the original one, where Neo goes to consult the Oracle. Or you pick another scenario, similar scenario, where the Oracle knows how this will play out. So what is Justice's role when she knows how it will play out? How is she to advise? And this is where this gets, wow, this is just, it's a mind-boggling card. And so how do we trust justice in its contemporary meaning? Well, we don't a lot of the time when we look at decisions that come down through the courts. And on my path and in my work, when a horrific decision comes down through the courts, I need to take an exhale breath and trust in all of my being that there is a much bigger picture that is yet to be revealed. Dee, I really appreciate this comment. Okay, that just sits with me so well. Okay, I've got a couple other cards on the table. The most angelic of all of the cards in my library is the Tarocco Soprafino. And for the most part, she is all white. And it almost appears as if perhaps she was given that red robe, but she doesn't need that red robe. The white will prevail, and her eyes are most definitely closed. And in the Gassman tarot, I'm just looking, we do see the issue with the knee and the elbow, but it's definitely a more balanced card. The trim around the neck is balanced. The eyes are fairly balanced. The design on the fabric is not. And if you look at all of your decks, look at what is atop the right and left side of the chair. I know Jodorowsky discussed that. So what are you looking for in a justice card, and how does it help you to find deeper meaning in a reading? Besides the title change here, the idea of the feet of justice being on this fine point, like a ballerina on point, it reminds me about subtle shifts and how just a little tiny shift can make all the difference in the world. It's like that reflection of throwing a pebble into a pond. You observe the ripples that move out, and yet we don't know the greater effects of that tiny little pebble. And that's one thing I take away from this card is how important tiny little adjustments are, and a sensitivity to that. It almost appears as if she wears the wings of a bird rather than wings of an angel. And the sword is central. The sword is center on the body, piercing the midline, the Shushumna Nadi, the central pillar on the tree. And the sword is a powerful tool on that central line. So let me know in the comments, for those of you watching the replay, what is most important to you in a justice card? And when you speak to justice in a reading, what kind of vocabulary do you use? Because I think this is loaded. It's a loaded card. And it's one, the lovers too, but this one even more so. It can make the reader very uncomfortable, not just the querent. So I'm very, very cautious in the way that I allow my expression or interpretation of the situation to come forth. And I think that's why the awareness of adjustment has been really important. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you too for your contributions to this discussion. And I hope there'll be some more people that will chime in post processing. I want to wish you a balanced rest of your day, and may you all find one little adjustment to make the closing of this day even better. Take good care of yourselves. Namaste.